It was all an illusion. It was all a fantasy. In short, it was all just a dream. Unfortunately, it took me 4 years to wake up, and then I realized that it was all a nightmare. I was that strange child at the end of the driveway. I was that child who ate dinner at the table next to the trash can. I was that child glued to the flagpole. Yes, I was that kid. And it was easy to see why. I never had a father. To her, men were evil. She spent years trying to exorcise the evil from my soul and body. So, in elementary school, I wore sweaters and ruffled blouses to avoid toxic masculinity. Basically, I spent my childhood with a target on my back. My mother was a religious fanatic. She tried every religion from Catholicism, my grandparents' faith, to Pentecostalism, but none of them were strict enough for her. In the end, she started her own cult, which was a twisted mix of snake handling, the holiness movement, and the second blessing, also called the second blessing. On top of all that was her own brand of feminism. Funny thing is, I later found out that my mom only knew these terms and never understood what they meant, not even feminism. She just made up her own meanings for everything. My house was always full of fat, sloppy women accompanied by either lesbian partners or pale, skinny, totally domineering husbands. This was my mother's community. Her followers were mostly women who shared her hatred of men, all of this mixed with the unhappiness of my childhood. And it never occurred to me that my childhood was unusual except for the clothes my mother forced me to wear. I thought everyone spent their hours in bed and in prayer. I remember having friends in kindergarten, at least from the time I started going. My mother was careful to keep me away from what she considered the den of evil that was public school. The school district forced her to send me to school when a concerned neighbor told them about me. I missed the first half of the school year, so when I was sent to school, I was a stranger there. Everyone else had already overcome their initial shyness, and I was left alone, like a frightened newcomer. On top of that, I had never interacted with other children because my mother kept me isolated. I had no friends except the ones I made up in my head, and they were nothing like the children in kindergarten. But over time, my classmates started to warm up to me, and I discovered the joy of socializing. This continued throughout kindergarten, although we had a different schedule than the other classes. We arrived later and left earlier, and during recess, we played separately from the older children so they wouldn't notice us. That ended on the first day of first grade. As soon as the older kids saw me, the endless bullying began. There was no end to it. And that cemented my position as an outcast. The problem was my mother's attempts to save me from the vices of the male character. She styled my hair, which she refused to cut, into curls that Shirley Temple would have been proud of. And although she didn't dress me in dresses, all my clothes were the most feminine she could find. She never bought me jeans. Instead, I wore capri pants or high-waisted pants. I remember thinking that all pants had zippers on the side. My shirts were girls' blouses, all pink and pastel colors. And underwear. Let's just say I was long out of school before the question of boxers or briefs ever came up. The school realized that this wasn't the best option for me and contacted social services. Mrs. Ormark was my social worker. She was also a deacon at my mother's church. The school was told to mind its own business, that my clothes were part of my mother's religious freedom. By the time I reached my senior year, I managed to avoid wearing the worst things my mother bought me, because I had saved or earned enough money to buy jeans and t-shirts at a local thrift store. A kind woman at the Salvation Army store took pity on me and let me buy enough clothes to last a week without wearing anything dirty. I repaid her kindness by giving the Salvation Army all the clothes I no longer wore, so she could sell them. When my mother found out, she made me kneel, pray, and fast for a week, but she didn't replace the clothes. I was allowed to wear secondhand clothes that I bought myself, ugly men's clothes. But it was too late. After years of bullying, I couldn't fit in or make friends. In elementary school, I was a weird kid with STDs, and in high school, I was a weird gay kid who even real gay people avoided. By then, I had given up trying. The humiliation was too much. After Shauna, I wasn't even allowed to have a partner in class. It was the first day of physics class in first grade. Shauna and I were assigned as lab partners despite her loud and stern protests. I think anything but "this freak" was the mildest of her comments that day. When we approached the lab table, I saw that her chair was dusty and decided to brush it off with my hand, but unfortunately, she decided to sit down at that moment. My hand touched her buttocks. She jumped up and very loudly and angrily declared that I had tried to grab her, as she put it, and not just once. For the next 3 years, until I left that school, She continued to talk about what a pervert I was, convincing everyone that I was a pervert. My mother's church, with its infamous revelations of castration, as her sermons were called, did nothing to help me shake this image. So no lab partners, no study buddies, no team sports, no gym class. I sat alone throughout school, worked alone, existed alone. The only thing the Salvation Army didn't sell was underwear, so, not knowing that you could go commando, I continued to wear the underwear my kind mother had bought me. I never knew that boys wore anything else, as I was never introduced to physical education. In high school, I didn't even see what a locker room looked like from the inside. Deprived of that godless instrument of Satan, the television, I had never even seen an advertisement for Hanes underwear. Unfortunately, the only jeans I ever bought were several inches too big in the waist. I held them up with a belt, but they were still baggy and loose. One day, when my textbooks were knocked out of my hands, this happened almost every hour, and I crouched down to pick them up, Timmy Shaw, one of my main bullies, noticed the purple underwear peeking out from under my jeans. He gleefully showed it to the older boys. I was surrounded by laughing classmates who pointed at me, took out their cell phones, and yelled to their friends to come over and look. By the end of middle school, things were looking up. Mrs. Ormark, my social worker, had been sent to prison. I noticed that for several weeks, the husbands of my mother's other students seemed very nervous and tired. I don't think any of them slept at night. In any case, Mrs. Ormark was replaced by Mr. Jameson. After reviewing my case and talking to the school psychologist, he insisted on weekly meetings. It took several weeks, but eventually, he got me to talk about my life, my mother, and my loneliness. I think he was horrified. He remarked that it was a good thing Mrs. Ormark had been committed to a mental hospital because her treatment of me was criminal. He changed his mind, and after visiting my mother when he really scared her, threatening her with everything from jail to losing her welfare, he started spending time with me. He became the first father figure in my life. He also introduced me to his brother, who was a lawyer. Eventually, the brothers organized my lawsuit against social services for the abuse I had suffered as a child. My case was based on the fact that their representative had successfully blocked all attempts by the school to end my suffering. I won the case and received a large six-figure settlement. Miss Jameson's brother represented me pro bono, so except for expenses, the entire amount was mine. That case had also instilled in me a love for the law, the courtroom, and the entire legal system. The settlement allowed me to apply for emancipation. I was free. Mr. Jameson found me an apartment in his building and taught me everything I needed to know. I had cleaned and cooked for my mother my entire life, so these responsibilities were easy for me. But he helped me open a bank account and start investing by bringing in a licensed advisor. He taught me how to drive and helped me find my first car. We went shopping, and now I had a whole new wardrobe. Contact lenses and braces freed me from crooked teeth and heavy glasses. But the first thing I decided to do after my release was to get my hair cut. Mr. Jameson drove me straight from the courtroom to the barber shop. I cried as I watched my curls fall to the floor. The barber raised his hands and stepped back, asking if he had hurt me. "No," I sobbed. "I'm so happy. I'm so happy." After years of long hair, my short hair stuck out in all directions. We went to the drugstore and bought hair gel and a hairdryer. Mr. Jameson showed me how much gel to use and how to style my hair with the dryer. I didn't recognize the boy, no, the man looking back at me in the mirror. I think I stood up straight, maybe for the first time in my life. Mr. Jameson took me to sporting events, introduced me to running in the gym. He enrolled me in karate classes, saying that a man should know how to defend himself, and besides, I needed something to keep me busy in the evening so I wouldn't sit in front of the TV, which I had quickly become addicted to. It opened up a whole new world for me, a world where people can be happy. He also took me to a Catholic church. He told me that I had a distorted view of God, religion, and our relationship with them. He enrolled me in CCD, Christian Doctrine, Religious Classes of the Roman Catholic Church, classes. He didn't need the classes himself, but he wanted to be there to help me understand, to give me context and explanations that my upbringing may not have provided, or more likely that my childhood prevented me from understanding. Gradually, I was struck by how loving and gentle Mr. Jameson's religion was. It was so different from my mother's hateful words. He also taught me how to ride a bike. That was another pleasure my mother had deprived me of. Overall, the second half of my senior year in high school gave me the childhood I never had. It was a time when I learned to be a man. Mr. Jameson, or Will, as he eventually insisted I call him, was a real find. Not everything was fun and games. Our conversations weren't always pleasant, but shortly after I turned to 18, Mr. Jameson sat me down and answered the questions that had been tormenting me for years. I finally understood what had been bothering me as I grew up in the social isolation I was locked in. Mr. Jameson taught me how to be a man. That was my childhood. Loneliness, avoidance, bullying, and trying to understand the masculinity my mother had tried so hard to protect me from. When I became independent, other problems emerged. I slurred my words when talking to people. Even with Will, I found it difficult to express my thoughts. I stuttered and whispered. Stuttering especially prevented me from speaking. Imagine a guy in culottes and a frilly shirt walking slowly through school. Not the most pleasant picture. To help me communicate and correct my speech, Will found me a speech therapist. I don't know exactly what he arranged, but it didn't take her long to fix my speech problems. The fact that I was a stunningly beautiful woman also helped me become more confident around women. It was wonderful. When our sessions went on even longer than I thought they would, I didn't mind. I was just happy to have more opportunities to look at those beautiful breasts. I never went back to school. Will made a brilliant move by getting me into an elite private school for my senior year. It was his alma mater, and he pulled some strings and enlisted support to get me a job there. I was still shy, but I had a good physique and a pretty face, and my shyness was mistaken for a strong, quiet character. Girls asked me out on dates and to dances. Without saying much, I became quite popular. I made friends, went to movies and parties, and asked girls out to dinner. Suddenly, I was a normal teenager, albeit an emancipated one. A week before graduation, my mother reappeared in my life. Somehow, she found out where I lived, and when Will and I were coming home from karate, she ran across the street with a knife raised above her head, screaming that God demanded my purification. I froze in fear. 18 years of living with my mother were hard to forget. Will rushed toward me, standing between me and Sheridan, who was running toward us. Was he really risking his life for me? The thought pierced my paralyzed brain. But it wasn't meant to be. My mother ran out into the road in front of a speeding truck. I swear I heard a crunch when it hit her. And just like that, in an instant, an important female figure in my life was gone. I had mixed feelings. My mother was never caring, but she was my mother. I hated her, but I also loved her. Why? Yes, she made my life miserable. But when I was sick or in pain, she took care of me and comforted me. People told me that my mother was evil, but I don't think so. She was misguided and had twisted beliefs, but she believed in them. Truly believed. I don't think she ever intentionally hurt anyone, although I know that in the end she would have hurt me. But I am sure that somewhere deep in her mind, she believed that God spoke to her and, like Abraham on Mount Moriah, asked her to sacrifice her son. But aside from the demands of her God, she was always kind to the women in her church, helping many of them escape abusive relationships or financial problems. She was even kind to men who asked for help or needed it. My mother lived on some kind of welfare her entire life, but she never hesitated to share her money or food with those she thought needed it. Yes, she made my life hell, but despite her beliefs, I think she loved me. Will insisted that I see a therapist because I had witnessed my mother's death. I went to one session with this therapist. She pointed out that I had never shed a tear over my loss. The only thing she said was that my main feeling about my mother's death was relief. I agreed and didn't go back. Personally, I liked Mona's therapy better than this psychological babble. Will insisted that I go to an Ivy League university and again used his connections to get me into his alma mater. I had 4 wonderful years, but the most amazing part was the women, culminating in the goddess Eva. Eva and I met at a fraternity party during my junior year. By then, I had completely settled in and was socializing with people, thanks in large part to Will's help and example. I was relatively popular, being the star of the university chess club, a member of the cycling team. Not as grandiose as membership in one of the real sports teams, but it did enjoy some popularity among some female students. And a member of one of the best fraternities, yes, it was Will's fraternity, I was treated like his heir apparent. Academically, I had every chance of graduating with honors, if not with honors. And my life was perfect, at least that's what I thought. But then I met Eva Stokes. She was a year older than me and had joined the chess club in high school. She was an honest but unremarkable player. Gradually, as we started dating, she admitted that she had joined the club for the sole purpose of meeting me. It was flattering to say the least, but by the time she confessed, we were already in a serious relationship. When I realized that I couldn't fully satisfy her needs, we started talking about living together, which I initiated. I was afraid that I would lose her because of her disappointments, that her attraction would lead her to cheat on me. She looked up at me with panic in her eyes. Are you saying you want to break up with me? Or are you breaking up with me? She grabbed my hands. I was surprised by her question. Only when I heard the words come out of my mouth did I realize they were somewhat ambiguous. No, I shook my head. I don't want either. I don't think I can share you with anyone else. The thought of being with someone else torments me. That thought alone is enough to make me punch a hole in the wall in a fit of rage. And I don't want to break up with you either. I know we haven't talked about this yet, but I hesitated before taking this step. I love you. I want to marry you. Eva's eyes lit up and she reached for me. I stopped her. I know you're often disappointed in my inability to keep up with you, I continued. More than anything in the world, I want you to be happy, and I don't want to cause you any more pain than I will by losing you now. But if you don't think monogamy is right for you, then we should break up right now. I don't think my heart can take it later. Tears streamed down her face. Please don't leave me. You're everything I've ever wanted. You're more than enough for me, and if I need more, I have Ernie. I want to marry you too. It's my greatest desire. It's all I think about. I'm yours and only yours forever. She pulled me close and pressed her face against my chest. We ended up in bed. Later, she asked if my proposal had been accompanied by a ring. I wondered if my statement that I wanted to marry her was a proposal, and decided that even if it wasn't, I wanted it to be a proposal. The next day, we went to buy rings and got married a week after graduation. We went on our honeymoon and were madly in love. She even left Ernie at home, which was rare, something I didn't know yet. Our honeymoon was cut short when Will suddenly fell ill. Howard contacted me and advised me not to delay my return home. We rushed back, even chartering a private plane, but we were only a few hours late. Will had passed away. Unlike my mother, I cried a lot for Will. He had changed my life and was the source of everything good and joyful in it. I still miss him. He truly was my father in every sense of the word. As a social worker, Will wasn't a wealthy man. He had a house he inherited from his parents, which he owned jointly with his brother Howard. He also had a well-funded 401k retirement fund. His brother informed me that Will had named me as his sole heir. I attempted to give my share of the house to Howard, stating that it should go to him since it was inherited from my parents. He refused, saying that Will considered me his son and himself, Howard, his nephew. We were one family, and he hoped that I would live in the family home. Eva and I moved into the house as soon as Will's trust fund was set up in my name. After my bar exams, I took Eva on a month-long vacation to make up for our missed honeymoon. I rented a luxury schooner, and we spent a month sailing the South Pacific. It was magnificent. We made love under the southern sky on secluded beaches and on the deck of the schooner at anchor while the crew slept. Ernie accompanied us on this trip as he had on all our trips since our first honeymoon. Eva explained that she needed to satisfy her needs. The crew was initially alarmed, then amused by the sounds coming from our cabin while I was on deck. I figured as long as Eva was happy, I wouldn't worry. And she was happy. We were both happy. We returned tanned, fit, and surprisingly in love. Eva got a job teaching at a community college. She had a choice between an elite private school and a junior college. The school paid more, but Eva explained that she felt she could accomplish more at the college. Besides, she saw herself as a college professor, not a high school teacher. She planned to get a PhD in philosophy. I paid off all her student loans and paid for her graduate school tuition. I could easily support her until she got her PhD. I got a job at my brother Will's firm, Jameson, Atkins, and Fisher. They did both commercial and criminal law. Ed Fisher mainly handled criminal cases, while Howard and Terrence Atkins handled commercial cases. It wasn't a large firm, but it was well respected. I liked it there and worked as Ed's assistant for another 12 weeks while I waited for my college exam results. I wasn't legally allowed to practice law, but Ed was happy to have me help him with his cases. I really wanted to feel like a real Perry Mason and was disappointed that we didn't represent murderers at the time. Most of our cases were simple assault cases, traffic disputes, domestic quarrels, or common crimes, burglary, shoplifting, or car theft. Even more disappointing was how often cases ended in a plea bargain. It was several months before I set foot in a courtroom. Ed explained that in most cases, two factors were decisive: the likelihood that the client would be found guilty and/or whether the client could afford a trial. Even the cases that the court assigned to us pro bono usually ended in a plea bargain. You have to understand, most of our clients are guilty. They are usually career criminals who are very realistic about their chances. They prefer to admit their guilt, save time in court, and serve a third or less of the sentence they would have received if the case had gone to trial. So much for Perry Mason. Ed joked that I should have watched Let's Make a Deal as a child. Let's give a round of applause to Monty Hall and Wayne Brady. At the time, the joke went over my head. Eva explained it to me later. While law turned into a complete disappointment, Eva started teaching and fell in love with the job. She came home happy every day because her students seemed to appreciate her lectures. When I asked her who appreciated her more, men or women, she looked at me strangely and asked why it mattered. When I said that they probably appreciated her face and figure more, she got angry and wouldn't let me touch her. It was our first fight, and I slept on the couch for the first time. The next day, I managed to convince her that I was joking and that I didn't mean to belittle her teaching skills or lectures. I realized how seriously she took teaching and how much she respected her work. After that, I became more careful about talking about her career. Ernie started showing up in our bedroom more and more often. Ava usually came home much earlier than me, and often when we went to bed, I could tell that Ernie had been with her the night before. I figured it was Ernie. Ava never gave me any reason to suspect her of being unfaithful. When the bar exam results finally came in, I passed. Not only did I pass, but I scored in the 90th percentile with a LSAT score of 320. Howard, Ed, and Terry were thrilled. Now I was a full-fledged member of the firm. Even though I was one of only 20, I was still immensely happy. Everyone congratulated me on my high score, or so I thought. I didn't immediately realize that I had lost someone I considered a good friend. Robert Garcia and I often had lunch together and were assigned the same cases. Outside of work, Gloria and Eva became good friends, and the four of us often went out together. I thought we were a good team, especially for those who hadn't passed the bar exam yet. Bobby had graduated from law school a year before me, and although we both took the exam in July, it was my first time and Bobby's third. This time, he passed after 2 failed attempts. But even now, he only scored 265 points, just 5 points above the required 260. He came into the office happy that he had passed the exam, but when another assistant told him my result, he seemed saddened. Suddenly, Bobby had other plans for lunch, and Gloria had friends she needed to catch up with. Ava felt rejected, just like I did, and demanded an explanation of what I had done to our friends. At the time, I didn't know. And when I approached Bobby, he first assured me that it didn't matter. Then added gloomily, "God, do we have to kiss your ass all the time?" He left, leaving me shocked and hurt by his words. Then, another colleague who had overheard the conversation told me how badly he had reacted to my success. "He's just jealous. Not only did you pass the exam on your first try, but you beat all of us. You're a star." When I told Eva what had happened, she couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe that Gloria had abandoned her just because her husband was jealous. For the next few months, she refused to see the obvious, sending Gloria one invitation after another, but eventually gave up. Her heart was broken. Eva was from the northern part of the country and didn't know anyone in my hometown. Gloria had become her right-hand woman and friend. They both worked in education, Gloria teaching at a Christian high school. My wife was devastated and couldn't come to terms with it. Eventually, we found common ground with people at the local college, but she didn't want to talk to anyone from the law firm. I started going to lunch alone. It reminded me of high school. I felt isolated, and ironically, that made me isolate myself even more. One day, I came into the office and found that the other employees were looking at me and giggling. This went on for a week. Then items of underwear started appearing on my desk. I didn't know what to do. I started stuttering when I gave presentations in front of my giggling colleagues. Eva laughed at me when I started stuttering at home, but when she saw my face, she hugged me and asked what was wrong. I told her what was happening at work, but she said that everyone was just jealous of me and that I should ignore them. Every day I spoke worse and worse, and Eva lost her patience and told me to pull myself together. By the second night, I was sleeping on the couch. The next morning, she apologized to me but said, "The truth is, Hack, only you can solve this problem. Just get it out of your head, and everything will be fine." It was obvious that she was losing respect for me, and it was affecting our life. I missed Will. He would have helped me deal with these problems. Eventually, my stuttering began to undermine the work I was doing. Clients couldn't understand me. My work also started to disappear, sometimes with the wrong labels, but more often than not, it just disappeared. Bobby would giggle and smirk when I embarrassed myself in front of a client. I knew it was him, but I had no proof. Eventually, I was called into a meeting with the partners, and Howard demanded an explanation. I tried to explain that I felt alienated, that I was being harassed. I explained that my documents were disappearing and, in some cases, being rewritten with mistakes I would never have missed. In less than 2 months, I went from being a star to a stuttering, speechless embarrassment. I thought I had overcome the trauma my mother had inflicted on me, but it was happening all over again. I felt like I was back there tied to the flagpole, and apparently I was. During the meeting, Howard's computer beeped, signaling an incoming message. Thinking it might be important for the case, he opened it. A look of shock crossed his face. I noticed he was scrolling through several images. I think I know what this is about, Hack. You still have friends among the assistants, and one of them forwarded me several emails that were sent to all the assistants except you. With that, he turned the laptop so I could see the gallery of photos he was looking at. These were sent a few months ago. Your friend must have sent them to me then. There I stood, with Shirley Temple curls glued to a flagpole. Photo after photo captured my childhood, including a video of my mother standing at a lectern preaching. My childhood nightmare was on display for all to see. I got up and left. Howard called after me several times, but I didn't stop and didn't dare go back. I was too depressed to even stutter. As I left the office, I saw Bobby and several other employees laughing. Perhaps Bobby was the friend who had forwarded the letters to Howard to further humiliate me in front of the partners. That evening, I sent my resignation letter to the firm. Ava tried to talk me out of it, asking what I would do if I left. Any law firm in town would probably get those photos from someone who sabotaged me at Jameson, Atkins, and Fisher. And she was happy in college and didn't want to move to another city. She told me again that I had to be a man. I opened my briefcase to get the thermos and wash it, and to my surprise, several pairs of underwear fell out. Ava looked at them and grinned. I should have known, she said. Gloria told me that we were separated because you were hitting on Bobby. That's probably why you can't maintain a relationship anymore. So much for monogamy. She left and slammed the bedroom door. It was the third night I had slept on the couch. I couldn't believe that my wife, with whom I had lived for over 4 years, could think or believe such slander. I felt lonely, even lonelier than I had as a child. Without Ava, I was lost. My life had seemed perfect, but now it seemed like an illusion. In the morning, I woke up to Ava's words. I can't stand your disappointment. She put on her coat and gloves. I agreed to monogamy, but you don't seem to want it. She smirked again and then continued. You know, I chose you back in college. You had a big bank account, no family to get in the way, no trust fund to get in the way. And the girls said you were great in bed. I didn't see that, never did. Well, at least I paid off my student loans and my master's degree. Our divorce settlement should cover my doctorate. I'll live with Bobby and Gloria until we figure things out. Eva turned and walked out. It looked like she had already packed her things and loaded them into the car. I sat there stunned, watching her walk down the street. But she loved me, I thought. I couldn't believe she didn't. The next day, Howard showed up. He refused to accept my resignation. I was part of the family, and he needed me at the firm. How will people see me now? I asked. They all saw me in that state. Take the resignation letter. I was so consumed with thoughts of Eve that I didn't even stutter or whisper. Howard sat and looked at me for a minute. You know, when Will first told me about you, he described a child with an incredibly terrible childhood. He described it as heartbreaking. He doubted you would ever be able to overcome those terrible experiences. But he was determined to help you, and he was very proud of you, of how well you'd recovered. He bragged about your strength. He laughed fondly as he remembered. He called you Superman, a hero. He called you his son. How proud he was of you. He stood up, ready to leave. This job is for you. You're my nephew, but more than that, you're our best assistant. Or you will be when you get more experience. Ed says he'll have a hard time without you. That you understand some things better than he does. You know, the only thing that's changed is that more people know how you suffered as a child. That doesn't change what happened, and it certainly shouldn't change who you've become. Take your time and work on your language skills. Call Mona. He put a piece of paper with a phone number on the table and left. I didn't contact Mona. I didn't go back to work. For 3 days, I sat in despair waiting for Eva to return. Neither Eva, Gloria, nor Bobby answered my calls or letters. I was alone. Finally, on the third evening after she left, I drove to Bobby's house. I was determined to meet my wife face to face. The lights were on in the house, but no one answered my knock. Someone had to be home. I headed for the side yard. Bobby and Gloria's house was on a hill, with a view of the valley from the back terrace and pool. This gave them the privacy that most of us don't have. As I opened the back gate, I heard noises. I took out my phone and peeked around the corner. There, sitting on the patio, were Eva, Gloria, and Bobby. His new growl startled the ladies, and they looked up to see me delivering a few more blows to the prone lover. "Don't touch him," Eva exclaimed, and she and Gloria stood between us. "What the hell?" I asked. "You're my wife. What happened to monogamy?" She grinned. "You gave it up when you admitted you were gay. Besides, I lied." Eva smiled slyly at me. "I got a job at the college because my friend Ernie works there as a coach. We were having fun before we got married." "I'm not gay. It's all a lie, Bobby." I wasn't sure why the idea that I was gay upset me so much in Ava's tirade. Suddenly, I realized that I didn't care anymore. I turned off the phone I was holding. "You know what? They can take you away. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, and I think Uncle Howard might say something about Bobby's job after I file for adultery, naming the two of them as accomplices. And Ernie, too, if I can find any evidence against him." I looked at my ex-friend's wife. "And Gloria works at the church. This video might shock them, too." Gloria blushed. Bobby just groaned painfully. "The good news is that I'm unemployed. My investments were made before our marriage, and Will's inheritance, including our house, is in a trust in my name, without you, and the court will most likely award me alimony, since you are now the breadwinner in our marriage." I turned and left. I walked through the house, deciding it was the shortest route. Passing the open bedroom door, I saw my ex, Ernie, standing proudly on the nightstand. I stepped aside and took him in my arms. I had plans for him. The new round of humiliation showed me what Howard had been trying to tell me and what Will had seen in me. I had a strong character. I could stand up to all of this and find a better way to live. Will had taught me that. I told Howard that I would be back as soon as the divorce was finalized. I wanted my wife to be a milker in this marriage after the divorce. With my investments, I might not get alimony, but I could afford to try to get it just to torment Eva, and I would do everything I could to make sure she was penniless when the divorce was finalized. When I got home, I would close our credit cards and make sure all the bills were paid. I planned to pursue Bobby in court. I would have worked for the opposing side in any case he worked on, for free. I planned to humiliate him until no self-respecting law firm would hire him. And Gloria? I decided that taking her away from Bobby with the most beautiful women I could hire as her lovers and having them dump her as soon as her marriage fell apart would be punishment for both Garcias. Besides, I didn't feel any resentment toward Gloria except for what would inevitably arise after watching the video I had filmed. I uploaded the video to the cloud and headed home to do two things: introduce Ernie to my barbecue and find the piece of paper with Mona's phone number. She was only 5 years older than me. I think I needed another prom. This could be fun. Part 2. The door was opened by the most beautiful and delicate girl Hubbock had ever seen. She looked at him with an expression of deep concentration. "How can I help you, sir?" the little lady asked formally. Huck knelt down in front of her so that their eyes were level. "Perhaps," Huck began. "Are you the mistress of the house?" The girl gave him the look that all little girls seem to have. "Are you crazy, mister?" Then she turned and shouted into the house, "Mom, there's a man at the door." When Hubbock stood up, the grown-up version of the little lady opened the door wide. "Can I help you?" she asked suspiciously. "Are you Meredith Larkin?" Hack asked, handing the woman his business card. Glancing at the card, the woman's eyes widened in panic. Her attention seemed to be drawn to the words lawyer. She hesitantly replied in the affirmative. "What does that mean?" she asked tremulously. Habakkuk sensed the fear gripping the woman and tried to calm her down. "I'm not here to cause you any trouble," he told her. "In fact, I hope you'll let me help you." He gave her his brightest smile. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. "As you can see from my business card, I'm a lawyer. Your former neighbor and tenant has filed a lawsuit against you for unlawful possession of your property. I would like to represent you in this case. Shaking his head and starting to close the door, Habakkuk added, free of charge, of course. The door stopped and then opened again. Why? Why are you doing this? Smiling, he replied, fair question, but it's a long story. Perhaps we could sit down and discuss it inside or here on the porch. Still not believing her ears, Meredith agreed to sit on the porch and, without hesitation, offered Huck coffee, which he gratefully accepted. As soon as she returned with the drinks, Huck began his story. The lead attorney for the plaintiff is a former friend of mine named Robert Garcia. I have vowed to destroy him in court in every case he is involved in or associated with. That's all? Why? I repeat, why are you doing this? What did he do to you? Meredith wondered how such a vengeful person could be so honest. Habakkuk paused. Then he said, I understand your suspicions and I can tell you that you will keep asking why. Until I tell you the whole story. He took a sip of coffee. Did you grow up around here? He asked. When she answered yes, he asked, have you heard of Rita Mason, the feminist church? Meredith's face lit up with recognition. The castration revelation? She laughed. Oh my God, I remember that. That woman was crazy. Huck lowered his eyes. She was my mother. Meredith looked down. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Huck muttered that she wasn't as sorry as he was. But wait, she asked. Your business card says your last name is Jameson, not Mason. I took the last name of the man who helped me get out of the hell my mother raised me in. He was my social worker. Hack began his story by listing the steps his mother took to save him from toxic masculinity because she believed he was the spawn of Satan. Your own mother, Meredith whispered sympathetically. How awful. Hack told her his whole life story, the childhood abuse, the salvation he found in Mr. Deere, Jameson, his emancipation as a minor, college, Eva and his marriage. He didn't tell her about the plastic surgery and the real Ernie. That was too much for a stranger. Law school while Eva was getting her master's degree. Bobby's jealousy and the destruction of his marriage. And she never loved you, Meredith muttered thoughtfully. So, Hack summed up, I've tried to rise above it. I'm not a cruel man, but I can't stand being attacked and left to fend for myself. So I'm going to meet Bobby in court and subject him to the humiliation that bothers him most. He hasn't shown up in court yet, but when I find out he's involved in a case, I do everything in my power to help the other side. I don't always win, but that's because I mostly stay out of it. Lawyers don't like it when I interfere, even if it's to help. He shrugged. But this time it's gone to court, and I hear you haven't hired a lawyer yet. Why? He looked at the woman and saw the sadness on her face. Money. Why else? She took the napkin that came with her coffee and wiped her eyes. When my husband died, we had more debts than savings, and working 2 jobs, I can barely pay the bills. I can't afford a lawyer. Here the woman broke down and cried openly, unable to contain the disappointment that had built up over the last year. A little girl who had been listening at the window opened the door and rushed into her mother's arms, hugging her tightly. Habakkuk silently vowed to save this woman and her child, whatever the cost. Next chapter. The divorce had been finalized over the past month. Habakkuk had postponed his revenge until all financial matters had been settled. As he had expected, because of his trust and investments, the court denied him alimony, even though he was unemployed and his wife continued to work. But a recording of his wife smirking about how she chose him in college because of his money, how she made him pay for her education, including student loans, and how she planned to finance her doctoral dissertation, convinced the judge that they should get what they had agreed to when they got married. His investments remained his investments. Eva was left penniless, just as she had been in college, although she retained her school district pension. Hack had no claim to her income or benefits. On the other hand, she had no claim to his house, so she continued to live with the Garcias. The only revenge he took was against his old friend Bobby. Robert Garcia was immediately fired from Jameson, Atkins, and Fisher as soon as it became clear that he was the source of the emails exposing Hack and his childhood traumas. He eventually got hired as a junior associate at Stiller & Myers, a firm specializing in litigation. Huck, still officially unemployed, although he was helping Ed Fisher with some criminal cases behind the scenes and without pay, offered his services free of charge to companies that Stiller and Myers was suing if Bobby was assigned to the case. One of the firm's clerks agreed to inform Hack about Garcia's workload for a fee. Although Hack worked alone, Howard Jameson gladly offered him the support of his firm. This assistance proved to be quite significant. Hack was able to successfully defend the companies in all the cases in which he was involved. Two companies rejected his offer, and he was turned down several more times by the company's law firm, even though his services would have been free. When Stiller and Myers finally realized that Hack Jameson had played a decisive role in their defeat, they approached him with a job offer. He laughed and rejected the first and all subsequent offers. When they learned that he had been acting as an unpaid agent, they finally wondered why. Upon learning that they were being persecuted because of Garcia, they made him an offer, which he accepted. He would not work against them without payment if they fired Bobby from his job. He reserved the right to take on any paying clients who wanted him to work against them. One of the law firms that twice refused his help was Struman Deutsch. They subsequently lost both cases, not only losing huge sums of money but also paying additional punitive damages. The companies, each of which wanted to accept Habakkuk's offer but yielded to the law firm's refusal, subsequently fired Struman Deutsch. The law firm blamed Habakkuk for its dismissal and happily hired Garcia. Unlike Stiller and Myers, S&D was a highly professional and respected group of lawyers. Their clients were huge firms that paid 6- and 7-figure fees each year, far exceeding the actual cost of S&D's legal services. Nevertheless, the loss of a client was painful, and as punishment, they wanted to humiliate Huck in court. Garcia was demoted to assistant attorney, and those in power looked for a case that would not jeopardize their large fees. The case against Meredith Larkin was perfect. The client was not one of their corporate clients, but was the cousin of one of the senior partners. The case was being handled as a favor to the cousin, who was trying to acquire Meredith's property for herself. Bobby was happy to finally be assigned a case, and as the lead attorney at that. At last, he would be able to show his bosses what a great lawyer he could be. His confidence faltered when the two junior partners were joined by paralegals, and it soon became clear that Garcia was the lead only on paper. Next chapter, Gloria Garcia was forced to leave. At first, it was fun when Bobby and she put Eva to bed, and she even hoped that Ernie would join them. So on Friday evening, she left the house several times under the pretext of going out with her friends from work and then to her favorite bar, Sappho's. To hell with men. That evening, she quickly downed her first shot of tequila, then waved to the bartender, looking around the room. She was surprised to see a familiar face, which lit up when their eyes met. It was Regina, one of her high school students from 2 years ago. Regina smiled broadly and walked over to Gloria. "Mrs. Garcia, my favorite teacher." Regina kissed Gloria on the cheek. "Call me Gloria, Regina. You're not my student anymore." Gloria patted the chair next to her. "Gloria, I have to tell you, I've always been madly in love with you." She laughed. Of course, there wasn't much competition, considering that most of the teachers were old, dried-up nuns. "Are you still in love? You're 18 now, right?" she asked hoarsely. "My sister is leaving tonight. We can stay home alone." Regina tilted her head and raised her eyebrows, asking an unspoken question. "Let's go," Gloria replied without hesitation. Their romance lasted exactly 2 Fridays. On the second week, Gloria went straight to Regina's house. At the climax, the bedroom door opened and Regina's sister, Ronnie, appeared with a camera in her hands. Gloria jumped up. "Stop taking pictures. Delete everything now," she demanded. Ronnie laughed and said, "Sure, no problem. I wasn't taking any pictures." Next chapter. "When Ralph died," Meredith began, "I was desperate. It was just Ruby and me," she said, kissing the girl on her knees, and told Hack her story. "Ralph didn't have any family, just like me. He did all the bills and savings. I didn't know anything about that. So when my neighbor Martha came to help, I thought she had saved my life. Ruby was less than a year old at the time, and I was in shock. Ralph was proud that I was a housewife. I had never worked outside the home, so raising Ruby and making a home for my family was supposed to be my only job. But when Ralph was diagnosed with cancer and suddenly," she paused and hugged Ruby as a new sob escaped her lips. "Suddenly Ralph died. And so did our income. I thought he had life insurance, but I couldn't find it. Martha seemed so kind. She sorted my mail, sat with Ruby while I went to work, first at McDuffie's Burgers, then at a second job at Priceco, to make enough money to pay for housing and food. The real problem started when Martha suggested we move in together so it would be easier to take care of Ruby without driving back and forth. When I worked nights at the warehouse at Priceco, she could sleep in the guest room. It made sense, and she was so kind that I agreed. I thought we were really becoming a family. When the tax bill came, she paid it without even showing it to me. She said she knew I didn't have any extra money. I had just started working, so it took me several months to earn enough to pay her back. I even had to sell some of my jewelry to get enough money. Then she asked for the money in cash. She said it would save her a trip to the bank. She laughed bitterly. Save her a trip to the bank? What a load of crap. Let me guess, Hack interrupted. Good old Martha lives here and pays taxes. I bet she's already figured out how she's going to pay them for the next few years, right? She just saved you the trouble and you repaid her in cash. Meredith nodded sadly. The lawyer looked at Ruby. You're a big girl now, aren't you, sweetheart? Let me guess, you're probably 5 years old, right? The girl smiled proudly and nodded. 5 years. Martha claims she has legal title to the house, correct? She's lived here and paid taxes for 5 years and you never objected. He shook his head. I didn't have a chance to object. I was at work all day, and she picked up the mail. I first heard about the taxes when Martha asked me to reimburse her. She wiped her eyes. I thought we were family. She helped me so much. I didn't know she had moved in with me because she was renting an apartment next door. She moved to save on rent, but I was grateful to her for helping Ruby so much. It was a fair exchange. In California, there is a 5-year statute of limitations after which you can claim ownership by adverse possession. Martha obviously knew this and chose you. The difficulty will be proving that you paid her taxes. It's indisputable that she lived here for 5 years, and I'm sure she has receipts to prove she paid her taxes. She nodded. He continued, and she made sure you couldn't prove you paid her. Cash usually doesn't leave a trail. Hopefully, she made a mistake and transferred your money to her account. If we can get her bank statements, we have a case. Without that, it'll be difficult. Meredith snorted. I don't know what to do. I managed to get Martha out of the house, but I can't afford to change the locks, and she still has the keys. And I can't go to work. I have nowhere to leave Ruby. Smiling at the distraught woman, he took out his phone. We can fix this. When he called the locksmith, she protested, saying she couldn't let him do that she couldn't pay him. He raised his hand to cut her off and gave instructions to the locksmith, who promised to come right away. Hanging up, he told her she didn't owe him anything, that he just wanted her to be safe. When she still objected, he thought he understood her. Listen, people helped me. People who weren't obligated to help me paid for everything, and one, his eyes filled with tears at the memory. One very special person left me their inheritance. Believe me, it's not a problem. And if you think I'm just another Martha who wants to take advantage of you, I'd be happy to draw up an agreement that says, 1. I will take your case for free, and all expenses will be my responsibility. And 2. Your safety and Ruby's safety are considered an important part of the case and will therefore be provided at my expense. He smiled and called over Rose, his assistant at JANF. She was a Latina woman in her 50s with 8 children, the youngest of whom was only 10. I told her about Meredith's childcare problems and asked how she managed with her own. 15 minutes later, the agency she used promised to send several potential babysitters the next day for Meredith to approve. Meredith cried in despair and said she couldn't afford it. Okay, Hack suggested, let's do this. We'll sue Martha, and you pay me out of the settlement when we win. What if we don't win? She asked. That's my problem, not yours. I'm happy. You can go back to work and Ruby will be taken care of. Isn't that what we want? The argument ended with the arrival of the locksmith. 2 hours later, all the locks had been replaced, and Hack left with the locksmith promising to return for an interview about childcare. Ava and Ernie were out of work because photos of their relationship, as well as photos of Eva and Garcia's, were presented to the school board. The photos obtained by private investigator Hack with a camera, hidden in a classroom closet, showing the couple having fun at work, were sufficient. The other photos were superfluous. However, the male members of the board appreciated the excessive thoroughness. Gloria was aware of everything, as was Eva. As did some of the women. When Eva was informed that the reasons for her dismissal would be included in all the recommendations that the school was required to provide, She realized that her career in education, which she loved so much, was probably over. What's more, she would never be able to afford a doctorate. Idiot Ernie tried to comfort her by suggesting they go to his place to talk in private. Furious, she pushed Ernie away, cursed him, and said it was over between them, that she never wanted to see him again. She also cursed her ex-husband and swore revenge. It was enough that she had lost everything in the divorce. Lost the lifestyle that her husband's wealth had provided her. She realized that she had given her husband the excuse he needed when she foolishly discovered that she had used him and married him solely for his money. But still, that bastard shouldn't have been so vindictive. Thank God the Garcias were still willing to take her in. She didn't have enough money to rent her own apartment. She wondered how she could strengthen her relationship with Bobby. He had finally landed a job at a great law firm, not unlike the one Hack had fired him from. But then again, he shouldn't have been so damn vindictive. But now that Bobby was working at a firm even better than Jameson, Atkins, and Fisher, maybe he could pay for her doctoral dissertation. Then Eva could find a job at a college. She would just not mention her job at the school, and she would not have to ask for a recommendation. Next chapter. Huck stopped Gloria in the parking lot as she was leaving school. When she saw him, she almost ran back into the house, knowing how he stalked his wife and her husband. She was afraid of what he would do to her. The night he caught them all, he had threatened to get her fired, but he never followed through. Hi, Gloria. I want to show you a movie. Hack handed her the iPad. That never happened. I won't, Gloria hissed, looking around to make sure no one was nearby and no one could hear. No one was there. Really? Maybe I'm wrong? Let's watch the video. He pressed play. No, that didn't happen. You can't use that recording, Gloria pleaded. Oh, yes, I can, he said, smiling smugly. Of course, I won't show it if you agree to work with me. While Gloria agreed to everything he wanted, he carefully examined her body. He watched the video of her, his wife, and Bobby several times, and she was worth the attention. He intended to enjoy a few sessions with this bitch before moving on to his plans for revenge. He had had several graduation ceremonies with Mona right after his marriage fell apart, but since then, Mona had fallen in love with her soulmate and gotten married. It had been a long time, and Hack could think of several things he would like to do with Gloria. Besides, he had to get revenge on Bobby and his wife, and he wanted to reward his private investigator, and a few other people who might not be to Gloria's liking, but Hack could insist. And then there were the sisters. Hack called Ronnie to tell her how well everything had turned out, and to thank her and Regina again for their help. Ronnie waved away his thanks. Hey man, you've helped the Twisted Sisters several times, and all for free. We were happy to help. Huck mentally added the sisters to the list of favors Gloria owed him. Bobby assured Martha that they had a good chance of solving the case. They would be able to prove that Martha had lived in the house for more than 5 years and had paid property taxes for all 5 years without any objection from Meredith Larkin. The case was closed. It was so convincing that the two junior partners dropped it, telling Bobby that even he couldn't screw it up. Bobby didn't tell Martha, and they smiled smugly at each other. The Discovery Service allowed Hack's forensic accountant to check Martha's bank accounts, which clearly showed the tax payments, but there were no deposits restoring that money to Martha's accounts. Hack was stumped. The facts seemed to testify against Meredith. Hack believed her version of events, but didn't know how to prove the truth in court. His private investigator saved the day. He valued Hack's weekly gifts of fine wine for Gloria so much that he spent time and money illegally wiretapping Robert's office and the apartment Martha had moved into. Under pressure from Bobby, Martha confessed that she had a secret investment account into which her tax deductions were being transferred. Hack could gain access to this secret account. It would also hurt Martha's case if the judge found out that she and her lawyer had concealed this account. Hack needed to find a legal way to discover this account so that he could prove that Garcia knew about it. But during Martha's meeting with Bobby, something unexpected happened. She claimed that Ralph Larkin had an insurance policy with XYZ Insurance Company that Meredith had never cashed. Martha had all the correspondence with the insurance company and wanted Bobby to find a way to file a claim against her. To her disappointment, Bobby couldn't think of a single scenario in which Martha could file a claim on her neighbor's insurance policy. But Hack, being Meredith's lawyer, contacted XYZ that same day and learned that Ralph had a $2 million policy that he had taken out before he got married. XYZ confirmed that premiums had been paid until 5 years ago, when they began to be deducted from the cash value of the policy. They informed Hack that the cash value would be depleted by the end of the year, at which point the policy would be canceled. But we already informed Mr. Larkin of this in a letter. Why are you asking? The representative replied. Hack informed them that Ralph had died 5 years ago, and that the account had been unlawfully withheld from his widow. When the representative objected, the attorney assured him that he did not suspect or accuse the insurance company of any wrongdoing. On the contrary, he was confident that they had acted in good faith and that any unlawful actions had been committed by a third party. Nevertheless, he informed the representative that Meredith would file a claim based on her husband's death 5 years ago. He then called Rose and asked her to call several banks and investment companies to find out if Martha had any accounts with them. The list he sent Rose included the company Martha had told Bobby about. When Rosa learned that Martha had accounts not only with this investment company, but also with another bank, Hack was able to obtain a warrant to obtain documents related to these accounts from, as expected, an angry judge. When they presented the accounts to the judge, they found cash deposits that matched the taxes paid. Huck also presented the judge with copies of all the correspondence that the insurance company had sent to Meredith, but which she had never received. Convinced that Martha had been handling all the mail, the judge issued a search warrant and instructed the police to search Martha's apartment. They found insurance correspondence that Martha had kept in the greedy hope that she would somehow be able to get the money from the policy. They also found notices from the state indicating that Martha had filed a claim to the property and concealed it from Meredith. The judge handed the evidence over to the district attorney, recommending that fraud charges be brought against Martha. When the court fined Martha for concealing information about her investments and bank accounts, Bobby claimed that the accounts had simply been overlooked because Martha had assured Bobby that they were irrelevant to the case. Hack shook his head, realizing how foolish Bobby was being. He then forced Bobby to admit that he knew about the accounts, but again insisted that they were irrelevant to the case. The judge disagreed. He referred Bobby and his firm, Strum & Deutsch, to the Bar Association. The judge noted that 2 junior partners at the firm had acted as assistants in the case. In the end, the Bar Association sanctioned the firm, but disbarred Robert Garcia for intentional misconduct. Next chapter. Before his license was revoked, Bobby was surprised when his wife filed for divorce, citing marital infidelity with Eva and Ernie as the reason. Her lawyer, Habakkuk Jameson. Although Garcia claimed that there was no infidelity, that he and Gloria had an open marriage, Hack argued that the marriage was open to the participants and that both partners were engaged. His private investigator and Gloria's secret, though unwanted lover, installed several cameras in their home with Gloria's permission, which captured not only Ernie and Eva with Bobby without Gloria's involvement, but also conversations about Bobby. Replacing Gloria with Eva, Garcia's behavior in court deteriorated during the trial, during which he insisted on representing himself. By the end of the trial, his arguments could be characterized as whining, which annoyed the judge. This annoyance was reflected in his decisions. At the end of the trial, Hack was able to secure 60% of their net worth for Gloria, as well as the right to live in their home for the next 5 years, after which Gloria could buy out her husband's share or sell the house. Gloria was entitled to 60% of any profits. During those 5 years, Bobby was responsible for 50% of the home's expenses, including the mortgage. If he was unable to make those payments, they would be deducted from his 40% share of the property, including interest. Hack felt he had gotten back at Robert Garcia, especially when the license revocation order was handed down the following week. Hack handed Gloria over to a private investigator who, being fat, bald, and 50 years old, couldn't believe his luck. He had never had such a beautiful mistress as Gloria. Under threat of criminal prosecution, Gloria agreed to a 6-month term. Gloria decided that 26 sessions with this smelly man were better than years in prison. It was on the 5th weekend that the private investigator introduced Gloria to his friends. When Gloria's divorce was final, Iva found herself in deep shit. She started wandering around at night, staying with acquaintances who had wanted to have fun with her for years, but soon got tired of this bitchy bitch who was good-looking but incredibly demanding outside the bedroom. She rarely stayed in the same bed for more than a month. With no money in the bank and refusing to go back to school, Eva applied and was accepted into a management training program at a retail company. Eva hated the idea. The position was clearly beneath her. But with her string of lovers who could provide her with at least temporary accommodation coming to an end, she needed a job to pay for an apartment. An apartment that made her student flat look like a palace. She cursed her husband again for getting her into this mess. It was Huck's fault. She convinced herself of that. As she drowned her sorrows in the cheapest whiskey the rundown bar had to offer, a large, bearded man suddenly sat down next to her. "How about I give you $250? Ready to lash out at the man for his rudeness, she suddenly realized that $250 was more than she earned in 2 days of work. She took a closer look at the man. How bad could he be? She smiled at him. When Hack brought Meredith the documents from XYZ to fill out, she collapsed on the sofa and began to cry. Next chapter. Hack and Ruby rushed over to comfort her. Hack held her close and reassured her, while Ruby and he told her that everything was fine, that everything would be okay. Gasping for breath, Meredith knelt down next to Hack and finally managed to mumble, $2 million. $2 million. She hugged Ruby and pressed them both against Hack's chest. I was so scared. I had nothing. How could I take care of Ruby? We were so lost. She pressed herself against his chest again and sat silently for several minutes. Then, she wrapped her arms around Huck's neck and kissed him passionately. You're our hero, she whispered. A year later, Ruby was a bridesmaid and Rose was a maid of honor. Huck watched proudly as Meredith floated down the aisle in the arms of her uncle, Howard Jameson. He knew that woman loved him. God knew she had brought him back to life not just for a second round, but for a third. His smile grew even wider when he thought about how much pleasure this woman gave him. They got married just in time. Soon, everyone would know that Ruby was about to become a big sister. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.